Okay, good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, literally on this last page of the Ayin Beis, page 1477, top of the page. The Rebbe Rashab here was rounding out the subject that began to be discussed on page 1466. Essentially, is 10 pages, 11 pages back. And that is that God, in God's plan and what God intended, there should be an existence. Obviously, the Savakos Baruch Aliyah Baruch Dira b'Tachtonim. That's what he wants, a home in Tachtonim. Tachtonim means existence as we know it, the lowest levels in divine concealment. But he wants that existence to be a dira, Baruch, a home, which is definitely a paradox, and therefore gave us an interfaces, tools and instruments, starting from the Torah and mitzvahs, and set neshamas in this world to fulfill this very mission of transforming the world into a divine home. But to understand the true mechanics and dynamics of this, we understand that there's two levels of Yichud. Yichud Tata and Yichud Elyon. One is a Yichud where a unification, where on terms of existence, Bitl Hayesh, existence comes to be aligned with the divine. And a higher level of Bitl Yichud Elyon, Bitl V'Mitzias, where all that we experience is the divine itself. But obviously you can't jump there if you don't first train yourself and become a keli to godliness, like it is with a student and a teacher. A student can't appreciate the depths of the teacher if he first doesn't understand it on his terms. But then comes even on the next level, where from the perspective of God, both Yichudim are one thing. They're both two parts of one desire, the Ratzon Hashem, to be Mekabel Elokus. One is a Gilui Elokus, Atzmus, just pure divine revelation. The other is divine revelation. That's a Mokeh Yesh. So the Gaba Atzmus, the Parsa and the Tzimtzum, which create these two tracks for us to be able to exist and for the structure to be able to assimilate and acclimate itself and integrate godliness, this Parsa doesn't exist. The Gaba Ein Shum Hevdel V'Hefsek Klal. It exists, I should say. There's no hefsek and hevdel. And the that's a Mokeh Yesh, which is the second level of Ayin, the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, Harihu B'chinas Yichud B'Atzmus and so Mamish K'maya Ayin Aleph. So in truth, that ultimately we come to realize that even the divine that is within our parameters that relates to existence is really one with the divine, just like the divine that's beyond existence, because both of them are equally united, and they're both equally distant and equally connected to God. And therefore, so from our point of view, the student's point of view, let's use that, you climb step by step from the art to the artist. But from the artist's point of view, from the teacher's point of view, that which he's giving to the student is equal to that which is within him. It's all part of one reality. And ultimately, the student will come to realize that. That's the ultimate levels that we reach, which we're not discussing right now, how we reach it, but it's through these baranus that we're learning now of Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, as we'll soon discuss, and ultimately the unification of both Yichud Elyon and Yichud Tata. And he explained it in two steps. V'hainu, that the ayin of the yesh, which is, we learned earlier, is malchus of Atzilus, or even Atzilus, and the yesh and isav of biyah, it's all as it is in Atzilus from the perspective from above, which means it's all united, both the Eiris and the Kelim. Because at the Kelim also are Yichud Elyon. Keinu mamish gam b'biyah. That's the truth from the perspective above. We have not yet reached that perspective. That's why we don't see it that way, because the Parsa does affect us. But for Atzmus, where the Parsa does not affect, meaning as a concealer, that's not, it's all united. And Oid Lamaila, even higher than that, the way Kalim of Atzilus and also the worlds of Biyah all are included, the Hashara B'Keach, what he calls Lifnei Tzimtzum, where God envisioned and measured and allocated the resources, or let's say, will measure the resources. Ba'atzmei, everything that will come later. So all of this is encompassed there. How the Yesham Sheresh HaKelim Ve'elis, there's the root of Kelim Eleilamis. When I say it's rooted there, because that's what he's envisioning. But there it's not a Metzias at all. Again, from the perspective above, from the Hashara within the source, within godliness. And so is it also, as it is there, that's how it is also from God's perspective. Remember, we said, Atu mishenivra elam, Atu la'achar shenivra elam. There's no shinui, there's no change from that perspective. Utter unity. The Inyan Habriya, who b'chinas izgalus bilvad, and from that perspective, what is happening is it's revealing that which he envisioned and that's which he measured from the outset. It's revealing a bria from Lashon Gilui. The Kameshu Batzmus Kenu Bob Izgalus. From his perspective, the way it emerges and revealed in reality, in the existence, is just as it was Batzmuse. Everything there is encompassed in the core. There, nothing is outside of him. It's only the parsa that he created, that created from the perspective on the other side of the curtain, that we, the recipients, the student, the art, can see only a limited, we don't see only a limited part of this until we do the Aveda as we climb to connect also to higher perspectives, ultimately even to this highest perspective. So that's a summary of what we learned yesterday, the top of the page, 1477. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, he said kemoi be'ashor. Why is it kemoi? It is not kemoi. Twice he said kemoi.
Where does he say? So, so?
גם בהבייה לאחר הצמצום, הרי הוא כמוי באשור בכוח. It's not כמוי, it is.
You're asking why he says kamoi?
Yeah.
Who says kamoi is not is? I mean, why you... kamoi means like it is there.
Okay.
I don't know if there's... He's not saying like me'ain. He's saying kamei b'ashara b'keach b'lishum etzias klal. He said also 3 lines before kamei b'ashara b'keach.
Yeah.
But something did emerge, which is the reality of existence. Okay, so that's a perspective like from the inside out, like I gave the example, how energy looks at matter. Or in this case, the source of energy looks at energy and at matter. You could actually even say the source of energy is like before the Tzimtzum, Hashara B'Keach, the energy is like Atzilus, and matter is like Biyah. If you want to really be more precise in the example I'm giving. Okay. Let's continue now. Top of page 1477. It says, V'yuvan zeh, 3rd line. Pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. The yuvan zeh, and this will be understood, Commission is bar le'il, b'hamoshel. He's now going back to the example he gave on page 1475 of the Mashpia Mekabel. This idea that he's saying now will be understood with the moshel that he gave, the Mashpia, the Mashpia Mekabel, of the Mashpia, the transmitter and the recipient, teacher and student. Remember, he spoke there that the Mashpia, before he actually transmits and conveys an idea to a student, so within him, there's two levels, but they're indiscernible. The two levels is the seichel as he understands it. The second is the seichel that will ultimately become the seichel that will be associated with and directed, cater to the Mekabel, like Ashara B'Keach in the Nimshal. So he says, "Da Mashpia regam b'chitzenius haseichel." Remember, he called that chitzenius seichel. Also, the outer dimension of seichel, meres lo'kol ha'pnimius. The whole pnimius radiates in the chitzenius. It's only once he begins to transmit to the student will only get a certain amount begilui, revealed. Remember, even in the student's teaching, even in the Aleph, lies embedded in a concealed way all of the seichel. But doesn't mention that. I'm just pointing that out. But in Gilui, in revealed way, this for the teacher, his transmitting on a chetzenius dika level to another has all the pnimius within it for him. Made etzloi kol ha'pnimius. V'imkein etzloi ha'chetzenius einu nivdal klal min ha'pnimius. So then, from his perspective, by him, the outer dimension of the seichel, which is going to be transmitted to the student, is not separated at all from the pnimius. Rakshu b'chinas is galus yeser. So then what distinguishes? It's more revealed because the first remains with him. And the chetzenius is ultimately becoming more revealed within him. Like, for example, dibur sheba machshava. When you begin to prepare to speak to another, so the dibur is more isgalus, the machshava is galus, meaning more conscious, more tangible, more palpable. So it's more bizgalus. But from the point of view of the quality of that seichel, it carries within it the whole pnimius without any havdalah, because by him there's no parsa. The parsa that he's going to use, the partition or the symptom he's going to use, is going to be relevant to the student. There it's critical, because without that, the student would never be able to receive it. So he's using this emotional that we learned earlier, actually not adding a fundamental piece. Well, you could say he's adding something here, but the concept he's already discussed earlier about these two levels. But here he wants to use the words that it's like exactly like it is. The chetzenius and pnimius are like one within from the perspective of the Mashpia, and the only difference is galus. Okay, any questions on that before I go to the parentheses? The Yesa Masim Lazeh, the Rebbe Rashab now adds, and what's Yesa Mas, what's more appropriate here, meaning in explaining this in the Moshel and the Nimshal, Ilu Yitzuyar, she Yenikra Chitzenis, Bli Hisalma Sa'er Ba'atzmai, She'en B'chinis Nivla Rag B'chinis Izgalus. Let me read that again to understand what he's saying. It's even more fitting here is the language is a little difficult initially, so I'm just trying to read it a few times. Let me just see again. Not sure what the Ilu Yitsuya is. Why does it just say she Nikir? Well, my initial thought of what he's adding here, I still need to give it more thought, to be honest. I'll be happy to get your assistance if you have an idea. But remember, the point is to understand. Let me first say what I want to say, then I'll. So I think what he's trying to say is, when the teacher or the Mashpia is preparing, like he said earlier, I'm just going back to page 1475. The language he used there was, he said like this. The seichel is it's the kvar kishihiskel. What he said there was that even when he is concentrating on learning on his own, he's learning something. In there is already included the seichel that he's going to convey to a student. However, it's not obvious yet, not even to him. That's why he needs a tzimtzum within himself. We're not even talking about for the student right now. Because so in his own self, he has to say, okay, now, doesn't necessarily close the sefer, but he puts aside how he understands it. And now I'm preparing, the teacher is saying, how am I going to communicate this to a student? That's already at tzimtzum, within himself. His psalm is ba'atzmei. She says, and that, but it was not nikr. That's how he explains it there. Then comes next stage where he actually transmits it. And obviously there's a tzimtzum and also a parsa, as we learned. I think what he's trying to say here is that Lamaila, by the Eibishter, doesn't work that way necessarily. He doesn't have to conceal it within himself. The teacher, a human being, if he's not going to conceal within himself all that he knows, meaning conceal, I mean not that he forgets it, not that he leaves it. It means that he's not concentrating on that. He's concentrating on how to speak. Like I mentioned, there are these geniuses, they begin to speak to students, their flow of their mind is still working as it is to themselves, and that's like them speaking to themselves. That's why they could overwhelm a student. Here, we need the student to understand it. So the teacher has to, so to speak, allocate, or like we said, measure, and say, okay, this is what I'm going to convey. I'm going to tell him, let's say, 20% of the idea. I don't mean it quantitatively, qualitatively. I'm going to share, the first class will be about the introduction. And the next class will be something else. All this within the seichel of the Mekabel, of the Mashpia. So there's a tzimtzum going on, Atzmus. However, like he said, outside of the parentheses, by him, in the chitzenius, radiates the whole pnimius. Because he hasn't forgotten what he knows, he's just not communicating that. Meaning it's more revealed as in context of what is relevant to the Mekabel. The Yesa Masim, he's probably saying is, by the Eibishter, you can't really say that there's a psalmist with themselves. Elyon, how would be if the Mashpia did not have to do any tzimtzum? Sheyenikra chitzenius bli his psalmist ha'er ba'asmei. She'ena b'chinas nivdel, rak b'chinas is galus. So he's saying that Lamaila, what's more fitting, that's my initial thought of what this parentheses means. That by the Eibishter, he doesn't need a psalmist, he just needs a choice to make. That the chitzenius should now begin to emerge. First of all, within himself, the hashara b'keach. Before the hashara b'keach, before he envisions, before he allocates, he measures, we know there's not yet that conscious focus on the zulas, on the other. There it's still a oir la'atzmei, the higher level of ayin and oir. That's only a oir la'atzmei, not connected to yesh. Here he's chosen without his psalmist. So this process, is not separate. It's only a level of, he's revealing from within himself the oir that's going to be relevant to existence. So by a teacher, an actual human being, there is an element of his psalmist within himself. By Lamaila, it's not that way. That's my initial thought in the parentheses. Now, one more point. After that comes the actual tzimtzum. The tzimtzum will come in order for the Mekabel to receive. It has to be an actual psalmist. But again, that is psalmist, like we said, the tzimtzum and the parsa don't conceal from the Maila, from the point of view of Atzmus. It's only a concealment from the point of view of the recipient. That's what I think he's saying in the parentheses, and that's why he says Yeser Masim and Elyon, because he's talking about using the mashal. How do you explain Lamaila? He has to give a scenario where imagine this: the teacher does not have to conceal his pnimius in order for the chitzenius to start emerging. Even when he does conceal, it's still the pnimius is completely there, even lamata. But Lamaila, there's that without distinction. That's what I think the parentheses is coming to say. But I don't want to say this definitively 100%. I want to read it a few more times and really make sure that's really pshat. But as I said, I'm open to hear other ways of understanding it. And let me stop for that if anybody wants to comment or ask anything.
The Hisgalus is not a real thing. Klape Atzmus is the same thing.
I need to understand before you go on. Are you giving another explanation, or you're asking something on what I said?
I'm asking something.
Or you're just clarifying for yourself the points. I just want to know.
It's not clear to me, but he's saying that the Yichud.
Well, I just gave an explanation of the parentheses. Where I've spoken about this in the past, that there are levels where the Eibishter Kavyochel is not even conscious of what he has within himself, because consciousness is not necessarily a maila l'maila. The fact that it says that he's megala something gamla atzmei, like we know, we talk kodim alei saratz, and we talk about levels that are not revealed. Then he chooses to reveal it also to himself because he wants it to begin to have something tangible. It's like, for example, we're all born with the will to have a home. Ein odem b'loi bayis, ein odem b'loi karka. But when it's not revealed within us, it could take years. So a lot of things are dormant within our inner superconscious that's not aware. Then comes the day we become aware. Kavyochel amayla, that's also that way. Not because God is not aware because he's not mature, because of a weakness. It's because he's higher than awareness. Then comes a gili. I just wanted to add that. Maybe that'll help. Anyway, but go on, please.
Okay, you clarified a little bit, but still, Lamailo by Atzmus, it's good for a human being, Hamugbo. But by Atzmus, how could you say that he was not conscious and these galus?
Because he's higher than consciousness. Atzmus is Gili is no Maila by Atzmus. Atzmus is not Gili. Gili is only a Maila in our world, in our reality. Atzmus doesn't need Gili. Atzmus is completely intact without Gili. The whole idea of Gili is a Rotzana Atzmus. He wants to, and I've said this you've asked this question many, many times, and I've always told you, Oyer is Berotzana Atzmus. Atzmus is not Oyer. He wants to reveal. A sun has to give off sunlight. It was created for that purpose. The Eibush is not a Moyer. So Gili is not something that is quality even. He wants to create existence like we have. We need Gilui. If Eibishter would not choose Gilui, we would not be able to understand how he created existence. If that's what you're asking.
Okay, thank you.
But that's a separate point, not really relevant even to what we're discussing here. That's in general. I'm talking about this actual parentheses, what he's coming to add. Okay. Any questions on the parentheses or anything we learned till now? Any comments? Moving on. Okay. So this is all the mashal. Now he's going back to the nimshal, how it is above, besides the parentheses. Well, kamoy kain, and so too is it, klolos inyan hayesavus, that the general creation, gam ba'ashara b'keach, also as it stands within God envisioning or God measuring or God allocating. B'koyach, meaning still in the potential, it's not actual. What kol masha osid liyas b'peil. So it's envisioning like an architect would allocate or envision what he's going to create and what resources he needs. So he says all of that, hurak b'chinas is galus levad. It's only Izgalus. It's Izgalus because higher than that is the first level of Oyer that has nothing to do with existence. It's an Oyer just to reveal himself. So when this comes, this is already the Izgalus, like we talked with his teacher, with the Mashpia. Mashpia is now revealing within himself a seichel that is going to be revealed to a student, to a Mekabel. But in the teacher, it's all one. And it's only the difference is that it's more revealed, it's more conscious, if you wish, or more tangible. But in that level, of the Mashpia, it's all completely and utterly and absolutely seamlessly b'tachlis Yichud, in utter seamless unity. You don't have two levels. It's all one within him, as we've been discussing. Atzmus ain't shum hevdel. There's no difference between the two, because the parsa doesn't affect him in that way. The student, there's a major difference. The student is only going to receive, at least on a revealed level, a certain part of that gilui, which, to put it in aces of the tzimtzum and the kav, look at the kav. Compare a kav, the stream of consciousness after the tzimtzum, to the Ein Sof before the tzimtzum. So even though it touches it and it originates from there and it has something in common, but a kav is a stream of light. It has milo and mato. It's a thread and like a laser beam. Ein Sof before the tzimtzum is Ein Sof and fills everything. It's not a narrow light, and it doesn't create higher and lower, because there is no higher and lower. That's the distinction. That's what the tzimtzum does. That distinction is only from the point of view of the Mekabel. Basically, from the point of view of Atzmus, the kav is exactly as the Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, because he sees within it all that divine consciousness. He doesn't say those aces. I'm using it just to drive the point home. And I'm ready to say, even though the Rebbe Rashab doesn't say it, very clear that's what he's referring to. And it also includes understanding the kav in that way. But this is all, again, the perspective from above. So now the Rebbe Rashab is going to go back, unless somebody wants to ask anything. Any questions? What's beautiful about this, before we continue, is you have here all the bases covered in a total interface. You have our perspective. You have our perspective from the yesh, bitla yesh, to see godliness. You have our perspective of seeing godliness higher than the yesh. You have also God's perspective. And all of it is going to come together, obviously in stages. That's why we don't jump. First we say Shema, and then Baruch Shem, and we say it every day. And it's a process, it's a journey. It's a constant journey. Fact of the matter is, we've been traveling now 5,784 years. And toward Mashiach. Mashiach comes, you'll have V'nigla Kved Hashem, you'll have these levels all revealed. And it's been an Aved even for the greatest tzaddikim of drawing down these levels of Yichud. Not just understanding it, but actually experiencing it in this world. So it's a difficult and hard, arduous process, as we see. What can I tell you? The war raging in Israel, you see, the Achdus is not yet totally revealed in this world. That's pretty clear. Hopefully our learning this is going to counter that balance and help finish the job to bring godliness completely revealed in existence. But my point is, it's a constant journey. And what you have here is a blueprint, which is really all of Ayin Beis, of different ways, different steps in the process of achieving the utter ultimate unity, the way God sees it. But we don't get there if we don't first go through our eyes, through our. Remember a big central theme, which we're going to get back to, that Rebbe Rashab, literally in the last, basically from page 1352, is Er Hariyah. Remember vision, seeing. That there's the vision that the eye sees, and there you need siyua, you need support from Torah and the malachim and the Einei Ha'eda, the leaders, and the malachim and the angels. Then there's the etzem koyach hariyah and the nefesh that just has the power to see. And ultimately the goal of Asad love will be the Einenu me'ides kishemesh v'yareach, that we will see directly as it is in the highest level without needing any support directly. So it's a process. And ultimately, the goal is to see it the way God sees it. But that doesn't come, as I said, without many, many steps of Avodah. So this is somewhat of a summary of what we've learned. Now he's going to go back. What we're learning next here is back to page 1474, where he started. We said, Kael Deus Hashem. We said the words, the Eibush is Kael both Deus. Shneim emes v'shneim miyuchodim be'ein sof. So it really began on page 1472. He said, Das Elyon and Das Tachton, the two Daas, hein hofchim zemezeh. They're two opposites. One sees it from below, the perspective from below, one sees it from the perspective from above. And when you say Kel Deus Hashem, you're saying Shesevel Beza Deus Ke'echad. So he began explaining that on page 1472. That Lagaba Atzmus, these distinctions don't exist. And yet there's still two levels of Ayin, like he explained on the bottom of page 1474, because the Eibishter wants two. Not because there are by him two. He wants these two tracks that will ultimately manifest within existence. So he's now going back and tying together. He says like this. Yeah, back 1472 and then 1473 and on until where we are now, 5 pages ago. The Gab Atzmus is Baruch Beza Deus Shavit. From the perspective of Atzmus, both perspectives are equal. The Das Tachton, the perspective Das Tachton, the Hainu, Chinas Ayin Shal Hayesh. That's the Ayin of the Yesh, the Ayin that associates and relates and engages with the Yesh of existence. Va'yesh Shenesava, and the Yesh that is created by it, like we just said, is an utter state of nullification and sublimation and unification. Just like the higher level of the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, which is Das Elyon. As we just elaborated in the last few pages, and especially the last section we just learned. So that explains Kel Deus Havaya, that perspective from above, that where he unites both. And now the Rebbe Rashab goes back to the concept of Yichud as discussed from page 1466, which is where he began the mitzvah of to understand how you can transform the animal soul, v'hafta. He said we have to understand first what is Shema and v'hoyim Shemaya. He says like this, U'kamoy Kain, and so too is it, v'chinas hayichud lamata, v'neshamis Yisrael. So he's now going to our avodah. And so too the yichud lamata, that v'neshamis Yisrael, the souls of Israel, down below, we come down below, and our mitzvah, like he said on page 1466, just to read the words again, he says, the klolus mitzvah sakrishmu mitzvah sayichud elakus, and he says clearly that this is one second. I'm looking for a particular expression. Zeh you say kol ha-mitzvahs, and this is the yesod of all mitzvahs, this yichud. So who does this? Who is given this mitzvah of yichud? We have a mitzvah. Obviously, from the point of view of Atzmus, he doesn't need the yichud. It's all one by him. The point is to create a Tachtonim, a world below, and we should reveal this level of yichud. So he says the same thing with the yichud lamata b'neshamis Yisrael. Shemiyachdim eisi is baruch, where they integrate and they are uniting God. B'bchinas yichud elah v'yichud tata. When he says miyachdim eisi is baruch means that they are demonstrating the yichud of Hashem in existence in levels, 2 levels, yichud elah v'yichud tata. Shezeu bebeis b'chinas ayin hanal. That's the 2 levels of ayin. Yichud elah being like Das Elyon, the ayin of the Yesh Amiti, and the second yichud is yichud of Das Tachton, of the ayin of the Yesh Hanivro. Commission is barely ill, as it was explained earlier. Hine, in this process of yichud, that neshamas Yisrael lamato tzrichim liyachid gam beis hayichudim hanal. It's not just that they're creating 2 levels of unity, Yichud Tata and Yichud Elah. There's another aspect to this. They have to unite both Yichudim. Not just, again, 2 dimensions. You could say there's Yichud Tata, Bitla Yesh, and then there's bittul mitzias. No, that itself needs to be unified, as he explained on page 1466 as well, just using the same language. He says that the goal is, he says clearly, Yichud hanal. That kol echad. That's the words in 1466. So you have to also connect the two yichudim. Lemahave echad be'echad. As the expression goes, lemahave echad be'echad. One with one. What are the two echads? Yichud Tato and Yichud Elah. Hainu, that the lower level of echad should be encompassed in the higher level of echad, which means shebchinis Yichud Tato, bchinis Yichud mamish kama Yichud Elah. That the Yichud Tato is a Yichud united completely like Yichud Elah, which of course is a tremendous chiddush, because you could argue Yichud Tato is bitla yesh. That's it. A human being, thank God, is able to, instead of focusing on his selfish natural interests, he's directed himself bitla yesh. But that's it. Bitla mitzias is the domain of a completely different reality, not achievable. He says no. The Yichud Tato in essence is really one with Yichud Elah, and that's how God sees it. Which means that we have the capacity to access this third dimension where that's united Kel Deus Havaya and these two levels of Yichud. That's what he's adding here. So the Kamei Kain is coming to say everything we learned here is not just Lamaila from God's perspective. That we in our Avodah Lamata also need to unite the two levels of Yichud. In addition to having Yichud Tato, Yichud Elah, we need to have one more level of Yichud, which shows how both of them are one. That means we have to see it from God's point of view, as if there's no parsa, which of course is a tremendous chiddush, because we said before, the parsa does affect the student, the Mekabel, us. However, that's our avodah. Our avodah is not just to recognize the divine after the parsa, but also to recognize the divine before the parsa, before the tzimtzum, going back to the central theme of volume 2 and volume 3, that we are integrating, interfacing post-Tzimtzum consciousness with pre-Tzimtzum reality. That's really, in other words, what he's saying here. V'hainu, this means the b'chinas ha'ayin shala yesh, that the ayin that is associating with the creation of yesh, who gam came by Atzmus is baruch, is coming. It's not coming from the ayin of the yesh amiti, like we said. It's not ayin ma'ayin. It's an ayin that originates all the way in the source, because that's what God wanted. Umiyuchad boy betachlis, and it's utterly and seamlessly united with Him. Ubam b'chinas Atzmus, and it comes from Atzmus shalei b'chinas lichuk v'nivdal, and that level does not come with any distance or separation. Ki atzimtzum eina mafsik klal agaba Atzmus. Because as we've learned, that Tzimtzum does not create any interruption or any concealment compared to Atzmus. You see here, he interchanges Parsa Tzimtzum, because he's not negay right now, which the difference, but it's really both of them are not obviously a concealment Legaba Atzmus. Valkain. And since that's the way it is in Atzmus, Gam Kamoisha Babi Izgalus Arihu Miyuchid Betachlis Batzmusay. Now we understand the importance why he kept saying that when it comes to Izgalus, it's also that way. So just like in Atzmus, it's one, all these levels, over the level of the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. So also when it comes to Izgalus and Ashara B'Keach, or later in Atzilus and so on, it's all utterly united with Atzmus. Umamela, and therefore, as an extension of that, inevitably, Kamoy Kain Gam Kol Mashanisava. Therefore, not just what comes Izgalus in the creation process, but that actually everything that's created, so that leads us to say that not just within Atzmus consciousness, within the Lakus, within the Mashpia, but the very existence in reality, if we're able to see it from Atzmus' point of view, it's really Hamshachim Atzmus and it's united with him, but Tachlis Yichud. Exactly like the highest levels of oil that are completely and focused only on godliness. Again, that expression. The only thing is it's now come into a revealed state. There it was all encompassed like the light within the sun. Nothing is recognizable there. Here it's also come Izgalus And that Isgalus is carrying the same level of unification as it is in the core. And all this is meant to be something that Neshamas Yisrael Lamata draw down and reveal and express. That's the key chiddush here. That because it's no chiddush that Legaba Atzmus is that way. The chiddush that we can access it and we can experience it and bring and draw down. U'kamoya oir b'chlal, like oir in general. Hubchinas hagilui. Oir is not mechadish anything. All oir is, like let's say light of the sun. It reveals what the sun has. Oir Ein Sof reveals what God has. So just like oir is a revelatory state, a conscious state, an express state, same thing, the Isavos, the creation of Harotzen. Talking about the Rotzen for creation. In the creation, Harotzen in creation, Ubchinis is Galus Yeser. It's even more revealed, because it's more revealed. What he means by more revealed, not higher levels are revealed, that it's more expressed because it's already associating with something that's going to be a tangible reality. I don't know how you do this, in Kriyas HaTeira, when you finish a sefer, the last 3 lines are read by everybody, and then they say Chazak, Chazak. So I'll just read now the last 3 lines. Is the last 3 lines that Rebbe Rashab wrote for us, La'esata of Ayin Beis. So he says, V'zeh inyan, and that which we're learning now, V'zeh inyan Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is the meaning when we say in Shema, the 2 statements, Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad. Hashem Elokeinu, like we learn, B'chinas Yichud Eloh. Remember, he explained, based on the Arizal, but from the Arizal, there's Shema Yisrael is Yichud Eloh and Baruch Shem is Yichud Tata. But then he said, but Prati says, when you break it down further, Hashem Elokeinu is B'chinas Yichud Eloh, and the last 2 words of Shema, Hashem Echad, Yichud Tata. What are the 2 levels? B'chinas Abba Ve'ima, that's Chochmah and Bina, that's Yichud Eloh, that's Hashem Elokeinu. And Hashem Echad is Zah v'Nukva v'Zun, Zah and Malchus. Commission is Boyle Il, where on page 1466. It's exactly what he said at the beginning of the 2nd paragraph on 1466. V'Shneihem heim b'Posek Echad. And both these Yechudim are in one verse. To tell us who? L'mahava Echad be'Echad. Because it's now the unification of one Echad, the Echad with the higher Echad. Shagam Yichud Tata, that also the lower unification. Hu b'chinas Yichud k'mo Yichud Eloh mamash. And that's why they come together in one pasuk. Which seems to indicate that, according to the first, the general interpretation, that Shema and Baruch Shem, they're actually 2 different statements and 2 different verses. Here, it's all one verse because it emphasizes even more the unification of the 2 levels of Yichud, Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad. That the B'chinas Yichud, Kamo Yichud Eloh Mamash, that the Yichud Tata is one completely, just like the Yichud Eloh Mamash. And with this, the Rebbe Rashab no longer wrote further Ayin Beis. So you clearly can see.
That's a great ending. I mean, I couldn't think of a better ending.
Well, I could think of Chazak, and he's Chazek.
Yeah, but it's pretty clear. Look, it's definitely a great ending because it's on a high note, how everything is one. And maybe, listen, everything's Ashgacha Pratis. I can't tell you what the reasons the Rebbe Rashab did not finish, and maybe, but I could say this. In Daas Tachton, at least, I don't know about Daas Elyon. In Daas Tachton, from our perspective, there's some things that were not answered, and there's some things that he didn't finish. So it seems to me that had he written more, he had because right here, what he does is he finishes the subject on page 1466. No, I'm sorry, not 1460, 14. Where is it? 1466. He 1466, but he answers all what we have here is the explanation of Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, but he left us still understanding what is Vahafta. And what is the meaning of the three levels of Ner, Shemen, and Psila in a mitzvah? And he didn't get back to Torah, and he didn't get back to some other things that the Rebbe Rashab said he would discuss. So even though, as I said, this is definitely in a high note, we're ending here, but there are actual things. But I don't want to take away from the euphoria of the ending here, because this is a milestone. We just finished 1,477 pages of the whole Ayin Beis, and we're still standing. Neshamas begufim, not like the neshamas by Matan Torah that they expired every time they heard one of the 10 commandments. So here we are. And yes, it's a certain simcha, but there's also a little bittersweet here. Firstly,
it's like Nila. This is like Nila at the end of Nila. I mean, this is it.
Yeah, and I pointed out the other day, I posted it, I think, right, that the Rebbe Rashab, before he passed, this was one of the last things he said, that neshama expires in the Yichud of Yichud Elyon, Yichud Tachton. So literally these words were one of the last words, not the last, but almost the last words of the Rebbe Rashab in this world. So that was clearly what he was living with. It's like reaching, we say, when Moshe Rabbeinu went on Har Nevoy, Nevoy is Nun Boy. His whole life, he was able to reach 49 gates, Nun Shari Bina, the gates of Bina. And it was only when he went up on Har Nevoy, the last day of his life, when his neshama returned to Hashem, Mrs. Neshikin, when God kissed him, is when he reached the 50th. So it's interesting, the Rebbe Rashab would use this expression literally in his last breaths in this world. But as I said, we'll take that in, and now we have the work to unpack a whole bunch of things that still need unpacking. I feel bad saying it because you think, okay, this is it. Let's just reach Yichud Elyon, Yichud Tachton, join the two together, bring Mashiach, and it's all over. But the fact is, as I said, the Nefesh Habamis still needs a little more here to really integrate this, to understand how it speaks to the Nefesh Habamis, which is actually the ongoing theme. So we're going to stop here, of course, but going forward,
it's not the last words. There are a few years of other Ma'amorim, no?
Yeah, but I'm talking about in Hemshech Ayin Beis, the logical continuation. That's what I'm referring to. I looked at that. I looked at all the Ma'amorim after when this was like more or less finished, Ayin Ches, and you can't really find much there that gives you hints. But you could find plenty of hints within Ayin Beis, and as I said, within the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe's mind. The Alter Rebbe Rashab did not leave us lost here. He did leave plenty of clues of where to go from here. But let's right now revel
very
in...
powerful. Ayin Tes is very powerful.
Ayin Ches is also powerful. So is Tafresh Pei. We're not taking away from Chassidus here. I'm talking about in the flow from here. Anyway, point being, now let us revel in the conclusion. We know where we're going here, that he's saying that in the Neshamas Yisrael Lamata have this power, the Yichud, not just the Yichud Tachton, Yichud Elyon, but also joining them together. That also in this Galus, and that's Shema Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad. We have to understand also Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad is these two levels as they come together as Echad be'Echad. Another interesting thing, if I may just mention, they said that the Tzemach Tzedek passed away Yud Gimel Nissen. The Rebbe Marash, his son, the Rebbe Rashab's father, his istalkus was Yud Gimel Tishrei. So Chassidim said, "Lahava Echad be'Echad." Echad is gematria Yud Gimel, 13. So 13 Tishrei to Yud Gimel Nissen. So they said, "Lahava Echad be'Echad," the Echad of the Tzemach Tzedek and the Echad of the Rebbe Marash. And now the Rebbe Rashab is bringing Echad here, Shem Echad, and the Yichud of Echad be'Echad. And then, as I said, in his, right before his istalkus, that's what came out of his mouth. So just to add even more to that, when the Rebbe Rashbi passed away, and Lag Ba'emer, so it says in Zayar, what were the last words that he said? B'chat katiris katarna. Here now, he said to his students, I am completely being joined. Katiris from the word kesher, completely being bound in the utter binding. And Chassidus explains that it was Echad be'Echad as well. So it's interesting how all this becomes the last words that the Rebbe Rashab wrote in Ayin Beis. No, it's absolutely correct that he continued saying and writing Maimorim. So it's not the end here. This is not the last thing the Rebbe Rashab ever said or wrote. But as far as Ayin Beis goes, so just all of this, it's just hard to imagine these are just coincidences. So my friends, I say l'chaim to you all. I don't have a virtual l'chaim. I have to bring l'chaim. L'chaim for all of us who traveled this journey from 11, it's 12 years already, 11, 12 years ago. And we say l'chaim to the Rebbe Rashab and l'chaim to all the Rabbeim, Tzemach Tzedek Rebbe Marash, and of course to our Rebbe, especially in these trying times. May the achdus that we are trying to channel into this world actually have its ripple and butterfly effect on that part of the world where they need most achdus, both the achdus of firstly between Jews and the achdus between ourselves and the mission we were charged with, and to bring total achdus and shalom there. Unfortunately, sometimes it has to come with a little pain and even war, but the goal is to bring shalom. The goal is we're not looking to fight a war to fight a war. I just read a very interesting sikha from the Rebbe in 1982. He spoke to the women. If you want, I could post it. It's in Yiddish and Hebrew. I think it's Chof Tes Sivan. Speaks very strongly about finishing the job. That if you really want peace, you can't fight a war halfway. You have to finish the job. So if you want, I'll post that shortly.
Please do.
Yeah, very, very interesting. It's in English. It's in Hebrew and Yiddish. I don't know if it's in English. Okay, but yeah, Mazel Tov to us all. And as I said, let's not forget that all this needs to be implemented and brought to reality. And hopefully we do this through the battles that we fight here that help our brethren, our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael.
Tell them Elokeinu to the highest extent. Right.
It says Torah was given, especially Primis Torah, was given to bring peace, a harmony, and complete. Look, well, listen, Shalom is the utter unity between Yichud Eloy, Yichud Tachton. Total Shalom, but Pamali Shamayla, Pamali Shamata. So that's what we're learning about. Shalom, Achdus. Yeah.
Torah's Teva.
Yeah, and the Teva, exactly. I just posted, I think, something about that, about eradicating Hamas and building a Teva.
I just looked. No, I didn't see the posting, but this morning I just looked in Chayenu. I saw the Hamas, what you mentioned yesterday.
I recorded a piece
incredible.
On it. Supposed to be posted. I hope it was. Okay.
Also, in today's Yom Yom, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab is quoted as talking about living with the times.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so the Rebbe Rashab got, and then if you look at today's parsha today, it's the Mabul. So, but Mabul L'Mlusa would be Malayar Theas Hashem, Yam Nechasi, which is what we're doing, Chassidus learning. So I thought it fit very well with the last day. It was Hashgacha Pratis, Bittul Metzias.
Very nice.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. That term, the Mahave Echad Echad, I would have thought it would be the Miyached. What is the difference between the Mahave and the Miyached? So that unifying these two Yichudi Tata and Yichudi Allah.
I have to look up in the source. It's a good question.
Unusual terminology. You say it's a common terminology. I haven't seen that before myself. The Mahave Echad Echad. The Miyached.
Well, it's a transformative experience, so that would mean to give.
Where's the lashon Mahave Echad Echad? We say it in Kagavna. Reb Shlomi, where do we say? Where's the lashon?
In Kagavno.
Right. Let me look it up in the Siddur. 1 second. Yeah, Friday night in Kagavna we say it.
In the beginning.
Right. I'm just looking up. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I've been studying that Kagavna recently.
The Meheve Echad Be'echad. The whole Kimno. At the end of the first paragraph.
Yeah, say the way they translate it. Okay. The Holy One does not take his seat. The Holy One does not take his seat on his throne until she enters into the mystery of oneness, similar to his, to be oneness corresponding to oneness. They translate to be. Lamahava means Lamaheve means to be oneness to oneness. He's talking about that just as uniting below with uniting above. And he actually brings Hashem
Yigoshu. There is also a pasuk, I think.
Echad Yigoshu. That was what the Chassidim used about the Tzemach Tzedek and the Echad Be'echad Yigoshu, not Lemeheve Echad Be'echad. Echad Be'echad Yigoshu. Echad Be'echad Yigoshu means Echad and Echad meet, like Hagoshu, like by Yigash, they meet. So it says here, it's interesting. It's a good to be oneness, corresponding to oneness. It's like one meeting one.
Yeah. I have a question.
I would think that Yachid would be a stronger unity.
Okay, but I guess the Zohar doesn't agree with your thinking.
Okay. Has the Rebbe Rashab ever used that term before? It's exactly in Ayin Beis? Lemahave Yechad Echad?
He probably did. It's not his. It's a lashon from Zohar.
No, I know, but did he quote it in?
Yeah. It's quoted quite a number of times. And Ayin Beis, almost sure, but definitely a number of places.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to ask something?
I had a question. In this Yichud of Yichudim, this unification of unifications, I have a question about sort of, what happens to the self. So we understand that each neshama is Elokeinu. It's a spark of God, but we're still independent beings. We're not God. I mean, I understand everything's God, and there's a paradox there, but this seems to be saying that if one could accomplish this ultimate yichud, then essentially you become one with God. So you sort of, the logic, I'm just saying the logic of this is that you as an independent being cease to exist, which is not necessarily true. I'll take a tzaddik. A tzaddik is, do you have an answer to this question, or anyone else? This is something I probably spoke about, I would say 500 times in Ayin Beis, this very question. Does anyone have an answer to this question? Just wondering.
What was his question? What was your question, Tom?
My question is that how this idea of this ultimate unification, what happens to the self? Because the implication is we're becoming one with God, so we sort of lose ourselves. And I think your answer is going to be, it's just seeing yourself from God's perspective, and that it's a way of reconceiving what reality is and how you view reality is probably what you're going to say, since you're saying you've already said it. So this is the only thing I can think is where you say it's giving up on your seeing the world from your perspective so that you can see it from God's perspective and become closer with God. So it's a whole different dimension of how one conceives of self. Is that what you were going to say is the answer, or no?
A lot, much more than that, but that's a little. Yeah.
Is that the right direction?
I'm wondering if anyone here wants to comment on this.
Well, Yitzhak, I remember you asking that exact question, and Rabbi Jacobson gave an answer, and I remember I even commented that it changed my whole perspective, his answer on it. It's one of the big lights that went on when you asked that. Remember you said, how do you have to lose yourself? And Rabbi Jacobson answered, is you're not losing yourself, you're finding your ultimate true self, so to speak. You're finding your true self. Your true self is the godliness. You're finding your true self. So if that's what you mean by getting a different perspective, as you said, from God's perspective, maybe Yichudi Allah, maybe that's exactly what it means. That Yichudi Tata is coming, uniting with Yichudi Allah, that you're seeing yourself. So you're maintaining this Yichud Tata, your own perspective, not God's, your perspective, but you're seeing yourself that you are part of God, that God's from God's perspective, meaning that you are really a godly being, and that you've transformed your perspective of yourself from a yesh nivra to a yesh amiti, basically. I think you might want to say that way. But it was your question that brought about such an illumination of that. Is that right? Not right, Ryan? Whenever you spoke that answer?
It's definitely both of what you both said in response is accurate. There's a lot more. When I said I spoke about it many times, because it's the whole piece of what means an interface. The word interface means that not one of the sides gets annihilated. So it's really the theme, I would say, of 1,477 pages, as well as all of Chassidus, and answer. That's exactly the whole point of what Chassidus comes to. If it was Kol Yachol, that God could do whatever he wants, then we don't need all these explanations. Everything we're learning is to teach us how you can integrate, internalize, without annihilating one or the other. So I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. I would say every level of Seder Shtalshus comes to answer that question, how to integrate it. In simple terms, a child begins, like Mudva, Murgish, Musal, a child begins learning Ayin Beis, but that child one day can surpass their teacher and understand everything the teacher understood without being annihilated. So you could say, why didn't he know it right away? This is the journey called Avodah, where we expand our Kalim. Just be practical about it. Let's not talk about it mathematically or mechanics of it. You grow and you grow. As you grow, you understand more to a point where you could understand things that, had you learned it 40 years earlier, would have completely overwhelmed you and completely annihilated your mind, at least. And then you've expanded, you become a Keli, step by step by step. And the goal here is each of us to do it in our own way. I always talk about the avoid of it. No two of us will do it the same way. I can assure you that I understand the Yichud of Yichud Elyon, Yichud Tata different than you do. Not because I've learned more, because I know more, but because each of us is different. Each of us has to figure out how to understand step 1, step 2, step 3, and all the steps in between as we climb. All that's relevant is, what are you doing right now to help somewhat sublimate and tame and train your animal soul, your body, your physical perspective, your yesh perspective, to begin to understand God's perspective. That's all that's relevant here. Each of us has to go in our level, and each of us, in some subtle form, have all these three. So if you're talking about mathematical, I don't have a mathematical answer. Like how can you have God's perspective and still exist? But from a Veda point of view, I have many answers. Just like I don't have a mathematical answer why the Jewish people, who are only the smallest nation on earth, are still here after thousands of years. It's not going to be a scientific answer. It's going to be a Vedadic answer. That when you integrate enough of Elokeinu, it transforms you. And yes, what you just said is correct, that it's God's perspective, what you said about ultimately that's the real you, but you have to learn that. At this point, most people don't think that the real you is the you that you are. Most of us, the real me, has pleasure in this world, has many desires, not even talking about things that are prohibited. And I'm busy taking care of myself. Look, at the bottom line is, no matter how refined you are, when you're hungry, your body tells you, I need to eat. You don't know when I'm hungry because you don't feel my hunger. We have to work on that. Avos Yisrael means after Echad needs work. The first person that you always know about is yourself. So it's not a simple process how to redirect the self toward God. And as you do that, you climb. And we also stand on the shoulders of giants, our parents and our ancestors. So we have the cumulative work they did that helped refine the yesh. And ultimately, each in our own way, reach these highest levels. When Mashiach comes, we're not all going to be equal. Everyone's going to have based on where they are and where their avodah is, and the avodah continues. We continue the journey forever and ever. But the bottom line is the interfaces, the gifts that God gave us, is a Torah, is mitzvahs, is davening, is all the things that we can do to connect with Him. And the more we do it, the more we refine ourselves, the more we can integrate ourselves with God's self. We will never be God. That's not the goal. There's only one God. But the question is, how much are we going to experience of that God?
Beautiful. Well, I threw you a pretty good softball. That was one heck of a closing summary.
I have a
Beautiful.
twin sister. We're identical twins, and nothing we did was the same.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. I hope only for the good.
Just imagine when we all get to that point together.
There's a couple comments from Mr. Howard Rosenberg in the chat section. He just first said a bracha in honor of finishing the Ayin Beis. May Hashem make open miracles and safety, rescue the hostages and Gaza, may peace be restored. So amen to that. He also said, and I think this is a little tricky, but just to read what he wrote. I know the rabbi said this class will continue with some Maimerim with the Alter Rebbe and the Middle Rebbe, which further explains but before beginning those new Maimerim, can the rabbi dedicate one class to review all the major points of Ayin Beis? Well, he kind of just did it in 5 minutes, but I'll let him answer the question.
Listen, I do it when I feel the right time to do it. I can't really do it by demand. Let me see how it feels. As a teacher, I have to ultimately, I would direct you to some classes that maybe some of you have marked where I did that already. There are quite a few places over the years, Sundays often, that I did a summary of the whole Ayin Beis. So it's already existent. In this point, I don't look at it yet as a summary. I'm right now very eager to understand the continuing flow. So for me, Ayin Beis is not over yet. Let me put it that way. It's not like we finished. We just finished what the Rebbe Rashab wrote, but there's a lot more in the Hashara B'Koyach and this Galus, except we have to look at other Maimorim to get the whole the portrait to emerge, the picture to emerge. So we'll get there. I can assure you that I shall sum up Ayin Beis more than once, and I have done it already. So we'll stop here. Yeah.
One of the things that I am very eager to know is about is there a Metzius beside Hashem? I know you said in the middle and the Alter.
Well, he just said right now, I think he answered the question just the last few lines. He said there is an existence, but it's completely Atzmus. So it's an existence, but it's all Amshachim from Atzmus. And from Atzmus' point of view, it's just a form of expression of Atzmus. When Yichud by Yisborach, he just said those words. You don't see it that way. We don't see it that way, but the Eibishter sees it that way. So even from the Eibishter's point of view, it's a Savas, but the Savas is Amshachim in Atzmus.
Galus. But this Galus is to who? Of course.
Let's just read the word. Kol mashenesava kol b'chinas amshachim in ha'atzmus u'miyuchad by Yisborach. So he doesn't say it doesn't exist. Kol mash is amshachim in ha'atzmus. From Atzmus perspective. From our perspective, obviously the Tzimtzum, creates that we do see things. Yeah.
So in other words, that means that there is no other existence. Of course, it's existence. It's the existence from the Atzmus. It's coming in a different form, in Ais Galus, but there is no
it
other
comes from.
entity.
You're talking about from Atzmus' point of view, or from our point of view?
From our point of view, is there?
From our point of view, that we don't see what Atzmus sees. There's a tzimtzum and a parsa. We're talking about, so that's why you have to. What are you asking from our point of view, or from our point of view? For sure, there's an existence. Bereshis bara l'kim. You don't need any proof. You just look around. I mean, you need proof from Atzmus' point of view. There's an existence, but the existence I'm shachim and Atzmus. We'll talk about this more. We'll talk about this more.
Well, you understand the point. The Bereshis bara l'kim. What is the bria from Atzmus' point of view? It's
a just said Hakol hu am shachim. Well, if you're if you were God, you would know. You obviously haven't reached that level yet. So right now, the goal is to try to understand existence from our point of view, which is to understand existence and that God created existence. And as you grow and climb, you will come to the highest level of understanding, which is appreciating that is Amshachim in Atzmus. We also, the Yichud of Yichud Elyon, Yichud Tachton. The point is, Yichud Elyon may negate existence, but not the Yichud of Yichud Elyon, Yichud Tachton. That's the key thing to remember, that negating existence is not the highest level. The highest level is seeing that existence is divine.
Wow, that was about the best way you could summarize it.
Yeah, we'll talk much more about this. Trust me. This is a big part of the theme that we have to discuss. I want to introduce you to a very interesting Teira Shalom from the Rebbe Rashab.
Cool.
It's quite,
I
if you want to get your head spinning a bit.
I had a question. I was going to wait till you turn off the recording because I wanted you to end your class on a high note. But this is not a bad question. It's just a detail. Earlier in today's class.
Let me just say, let me end the recording. 1 sec.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're stopping here. This is the end of Hemshech Ayin Beis. I will probably in the next class I have to decide either to explain this more or start working on the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe. But I think I'll explain this first more. Then we'll go into the Maimorim that this is based on, and they've already been posted, by the way, on Ayin Beis page. You have already the whole Maimor of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe posted. So I'll stop here again. L'chaim to the Siyum of Ayin Beis.
So there is class tomorrow, correct?